At Thanksgiving, my brother's son shoved his plate toward me and said, "Since you're basically the servant, clean this up." My mom laughed. I smiled. That night, I froze his bank account, but at 8:40 a.m., he was on the phone screaming. His rent payment had bounced, and his landlord was at the door. Thanksgiving used to mean something when we were kids. My mom would make her cornbread stuffing from scratch. My dad would slice the turkey with his ancient electric knife, and we'd all sit around laughing at stories we'd heard 100 times before. But this wasn't that. Not anymore. Now I host, not because I want to, but because no one else can or will. Mike, my older brother, hasn't had a stable job in over 6 years. He blames the economy, bad luck, a toxic work environment, and every boss he's ever had. But not himself. Never himself. His wife, Gina, hasn't worked since Ryan was born. Ryan's 16 now. Private school, new phone every year. Driver's ed last summer, paid for by me, of course. They live in a nice rental I've been paying for since 2020. The utilities, the internet, even their grocery bills occasionally come through my Venmo. I send money. They say thanks less and less, and the only time Mike ever calls me is when something unexpected comes up. It's been like this for years. I should have ended it sooner, but I didn't. I told myself I was helping, keeping the family afloat, being responsible. But something changed this Thanksgiving. They were 40 minutes late, no apology. Gina was on her phone when she walked in. Ryan didn't even make eye contact. My parents were already there, watching the Macy's parade rerun in the living room like it was their job. I had spent 2 days cooking, full spread, stuffing, mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts, cranberry sauce from scratch, pecan and pumpkin pie, and a 16 Tomielbi bird that cost more than I want to admit. Mike walked in and asked if I remembered to make the lactose-free pie for him. That was the one thing I decided not to do this year. I had decided hours earlier to stop bending so much. We sat, we ate. There were the usual awkward silences, the weird little digs Gina always sneaks in about how lucky I am not to have kids, and Ryan making comments about how boring the holiday is. But then came the moment that made everything snap. Ryan pushed his empty plate toward me across the table. No napkin, just bits of mashed potatoes and a half-eaten roll still on it. He didn't even look up from his phone. He just said it casually. "Since you're basically the servant, clean this up." It was like a switch flipped. Mike laughed. Gina gave one of those eye-roll chuckles. And my mom, my own mother, laughed too. I didn't say anything. I didn't make a scene. I just smiled. Not fake, not forced, just a small smile. I stood up, took the plate, and continued clearing the table while they watched football in the living room and argued about which leftovers to take home. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes with one hand, opening my laptop with the other. I logged into the joint bank account I had set up 2 years ago for Ryan's tuition. It was a clean system. I deposited the tuition money Mike paid the school, except I knew he'd been using it for other things. Rent, groceries, even a few late-night Uber Eats orders. I knew because I had access to all the statements. He didn't think I ever looked. I clicked one button and froze the account. No warning, no note, nothing. By the time they left with containers of leftovers and zero gratitude, they had no idea. At 8:40 the next morning, my phone rang. Ryan. He was yelling something about how his rent payment bounced. His debit card didn't work. His landlord was outside. I told him to put his dad on the phone. Mike got on, panicked, said there had to be a mistake. I told him there wasn't. Then I hung up, and that was just the beginning. By 8:40 the next morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Ryan was the first to call. He sounded frantic. I could hear doors opening and closing in the background, like he was pacing. He said his debit card wasn't working. His rent payment had bounced, and his landlord was threatening to post a 3-day notice. Then he said the best part. He was supposed to send in a payment for his spring tuition that morning, and the system was saying, "Transaction denied." I told him to get his dad. Mike got on the phone a few seconds later. His voice was tight, controlled, but underneath it, I could hear the panic. He said there must be a glitch, something wrong with the account. Maybe the bank messed something up. I told him there was no glitch, that I froze the account. I didn't explain why. I didn't raise my voice, just the facts. Then I hung up and I turned my phone off. The silence was beautiful. I sat on my couch with a cup of black coffee, the windows open just enough to let the breeze through, and I just breathed. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt calm. It didn't last long. When I turned my phone back on 2 hours later, I had missed calls from Mike, Gina, Ryan, and both of my parents. There were also 8 text messages. Most were from Gina. The first one was polite. "Hey, Maya, there seems to be some sort of mix-up with Ryan's tuition payment. Can you let us know what's going on?" The next few messages weren't polite. "This is ridiculous. You can't just lock an account without telling anyone. You're punishing your family over a joke. Ryan is just a kid." Then a voice message came in from Mike. He didn't even try to hide the anger. He told me I was out of line, that I had no right to mess with their money, that I was being vindictive, that freezing the account meant Ryan might lose his place at school and they could lose their apartment. I didn't respond. At 12:17 p.m., I got a call from my mom. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. "Hi, sweetheart. Your brother said something's going on with Ryan's tuition. Just give me a call when you can. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding." There wasn't. There was no misunderstanding. There were 6 years of buildup, years of covering their expenses, years of little backhanded comments, of phone calls only when they needed something, of Ryan treating me like a personal ATM. And the moment I set a boundary, they acted like I'd committed a crime. At 1:30 p.m., Gina called again and left a voicemail that started off calm and ended with something that sounded suspiciously like a threat. She said she was going to have to involve other people if I didn't stop causing problems. I smiled at that one. I knew what was coming. They were going to drag my parents in, try to make it a family issue, try to make me look unstable. By 2 p.m., the guilt campaign was in full swing. Gina sent me a long message about how hard things have been lately, and how I probably don't realize how much pressure they've been under, and how Ryan didn't mean what he said. She also slipped in a little line about how he really looks up to me, and that this could affect him for years. That part made me laugh. If Ryan looked up to me, he had a funny way of showing it. But just to be sure I wasn't being too harsh, I went back through the transaction history on the joint account. In the last 90 days, Mike had used my tuition deposits to pay rent, utilities, a car lease, and even a $379 charge to a hotel in Santa Barbara. No explanation, just there on a random Thursday. So no, I wasn't being harsh. I was just getting started. That evening, while they scrambled to figure out what to do, I logged into the admin portal for the school's tuition payment system and formally withdrew my financial commitment. They had 2 weeks to find another source of funding before Ryan's spot would be forfeited. Next, I opened the family phone plan and removed Mike from the shared account. It took 10 seconds. He'd be notified when his phone service dropped the next morning. Then, I logged into the insurance portal and removed Gina from the multi-car policy. Her car would still be insured for another 4 days. After that, she'd either have to pay triple the rate or stop driving. At 7:03 p.m., I got a final text from Gina. "Whatever point you're trying to prove, you've made it. You win. Happy?" I didn't answer because it wasn't about winning. It was about ending something that should have ended years ago. They just didn't know how much more was coming. The next day, my mom called again 5 times. I didn't answer. Around noon, my dad texted me asking if we could all meet that evening at their place just to talk things through. I already knew what that meant. They wanted me to fix everything. I waited a few hours, then responded with a single word. "Sure." At 6:00 p.m. sharp, I walked into my parents' living room. Mike and Gina were already there, sitting side by side like they were at a job interview. Ryan wasn't there, probably too embarrassed or too afraid, maybe both. My parents looked tense. My mom offered me coffee. I declined. No one spoke for a few seconds, just the sound of the clock ticking and the muffled TV in the other room. Then Mike started. He didn't apologize, he explained. He talked about how hard it had been to find steady work, how everything costs more now, how raising a teenager is expensive, how they had been relying on me because I was so good with money. He said I'd always been the one who had it together. That's why they leaned on me. Gina jumped in and said Ryan's comment at Thanksgiving was out of line, but that he was just a teenager and didn't mean it, that he'd been under stress at school, that he had a sarcastic sense of humor. They tried to sound reasonable, like we were all adults working through something minor. Then came the ask. Could I unlock the account just until they figured something out? Could I reinstate the tuition payment just for one more semester? Could I reconsider the phone plan and the insurance, at least until Mike got through this rough patch? My dad was silent the entire time. My mom kept glancing at me like she was hoping I'd step in and make it all okay. I didn't. I looked at all of them and said I wasn't angry, which was true. I was done. I told them the financial support had ended permanently. I wasn't going to pay for the rent, the groceries, the tuition, the insurance, the phone bills, or anything else. I wasn't going to unlock the account. I wasn't going to listen to another excuse about how things were too hard. I'd done my part. For years, they had turned me into their safety net, and when I needed respect, they laughed. Mike looked stunned. Gina just stared at me, blinking. My mom tried to speak, but I cut her off gently and told her this wasn't a negotiation. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't going to be the family's backup plan anymore. Mike finally spoke, and this time his voice cracked. He asked what he was supposed to do now. I didn't answer. I stood up, thanked my parents for the coffee I didn't drink, and walked out. On the way home, I passed Ryan walking toward the corner store. He saw me, looked away. I didn't stop. That night, I got one more message from Gina. "This is going to destroy our family." I read it twice. Then I deleted it, because I wasn't the one who destroyed anything. I just stopped pretending it hadn't already fallen apart. I thought the fallout would settle after that family meeting. I expected a few more texts, some dramatic silence, maybe even a social media post or two from Gina playing the victim. But what I didn't expect was what showed up at my door 4 days later. An envelope hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a typed letter, 2 pages, signed by a lawyer. It was a formal demand for the reinstatement of financial support. Apparently, Mike and Gina had spoken to an attorney, someone they knew through a friend, who helped them draft a letter arguing that I had entered into a financial arrangement that created a reasonable expectation of continued support and that cutting them off without warning had caused material hardship and emotional distress, especially for Ryan, who was at risk of losing his educational future. They were threatening to sue me. Not joking, not bluffing, an actual threat, complete with legal citations and phrases like implied contract and promissory estoppel. I read it 3 times calmly. Then I smiled because now I had everything I needed. I took the folder I'd made, remember the one labeled When They Lie, and handed it over to my own lawyer the next morning. Copies of bank statements, screenshots of text messages, even a few emails where Mike casually referred to the tuition money as a gift, not a commitment. My lawyer was thorough. He sent a reply to their attorney that same afternoon. He also mentioned that should they proceed, we'd be countersuing for fraud and misuse of funds. Their lawyer backed off the next day, but something about that letter made me realize how deep their delusion ran. It wasn't just entitlement, it was arrogance. They genuinely believed I owed them something, that they could humiliate me at dinner, threaten me when I drew a line, and still come crawling back with legal demands. So I made another decision. I sent a certified letter to Ryan's school's financial office formally withdrawing all authorization related to his tuition. I told them not to accept payments under my name or signature. I also flagged any prior deposits as completed gifts, not commitments, and attached a letter from my attorney confirming the same. If Ryan stayed enrolled, it wouldn't be through me. Then I made one last move. I called the landlord of their apartment building. I knew him. He had my number because I'd been the one handling payments all this time. I told him simply that I would no longer be involved in any part of their lease, that if they stayed, it would be under their own name with their own bank account. He was quiet for a moment, then told me what I didn't expect. They were already 2 weeks behind. Apparently, the rent hadn't bounced just once. They'd already been late for October and November. I had no idea. They'd been covering the difference with small cash deposits, borrowing from someone else, probably friends or other relatives. The landlord said he'd be posting a notice that afternoon. By the next morning, Ryan's school portal had been updated, financial hold in red letters across the top, his account frozen until payment was made. That was when the silence finally came. No calls, no messages, nothing. But I wasn't finished. I changed my number. I blocked every email address tied to them. I removed them as emergency contacts from all my personal and work information. I closed the joint account entirely. They were now on their own, and they weren't ready for it. By the second week of December, word got around. My aunt texted me asking if it was true that Mike and Gina were losing the apartment. I didn't answer. My cousin called and said she heard Ryan had been suspended from school, not officially expelled, just on hold until the tuition was paid. She wanted to know if I was okay. I told her I was better than okay. No one in the family judged me. That was the surprise. I thought they might turn on me, guilt me, say I was being harsh, but no one did, not even my parents. My dad stayed quiet, and my mom, She tried once more to talk, but I told her plainly that I didn't want to revisit it, that I had made peace with my decision. And to her credit, she let it go. Mike and Gina didn't reach out again. They knew better now. Instead, I heard about what was happening through others. Gina had been asking around for short-term loans. Mike tried applying for emergency aid from the school, but it wasn't enough. Ryan apparently had started looking for a part-time job. For the first time in his life, he had to consider that money didn't just magically appear when he wanted something. Then came the final crack. Just before Christmas, they were evicted, 3 months behind on rent. They tried negotiating, even pleaded with the landlord for a few more weeks, but I think he'd had enough too. He changed the locks the day after Christmas. They moved into Gina's sister's guest room an hour outside the city. That same week, the private school dropped Ryan from the spring semester. I confirmed it by logging into the portal one last time. Enrollment inactive. That was it. That little status update felt heavier than anything he had ever said to me. It was final, unmistakable. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel anything. There was a part of me, a very old, tired part, that wanted to call, to check in, to ask if they were okay. But I didn't, because every time I got close to that thought, I remembered the plate. I remembered the laugh. I remembered my mother laughing with them. That moment made things so clear. I had given them 6 years of my life, carried them, covered for them, protected them, and they didn't even respect me enough to hide their contempt. So no, I didn't call. I booked a solo trip to Colorado instead. First class, 5 nights in a cabin, no phone service, no guilt. That was my version of peace. By mid-January, everything had settled into silence. Not the tense waiting for the next shoe silence, but the kind that comes when something is truly over, done. No more calls, no more messages, just the cold aftershock of consequences. Then one morning, I got a LinkedIn notification. Mike had added me. I stared at it for a full minute. His profile was updated. He listed himself as freelance business consultant, a title that meant nothing. But the kicker was his headline, helping families navigate financial uncertainty. I didn't accept. Instead, I clicked through out of curiosity. No endorsements, no connections, just a few vague posts about resilience and perseverance. It was clear he was trying to spin the whole mess into some kind of reinvention. Fine, let him try. But karma didn't wait long. A friend from the same school where Ryan had been enrolled called me that week. She worked in admin, told me, without breaking any rules, just a passing mention, that the school had flagged a situation involving a falsified financial document. Apparently, Mike had submitted a forged letter claiming a scholarship extension, trying to buy more time. They caught it immediately. Ryan's name was now flagged in the system, which meant even if they somehow came up with the tuition later, re-enrollment would be a long shot. The school didn't want liability issues. He was effectively blacklisted from every private school in the network. That same week, Gina posted on Facebook a long, dramatic post about being betrayed by those closest to you, and how God sees everything, even when people try to destroy your family. Not a name mentioned, but the comments made it obvious who she meant. I read it once, rolled my eyes, and moved on. Then, a mutual friend commented something I'll never forget. Funny how the ones screaming about betrayal were the ones eating off someone else's plate the whole time. That post disappeared a few hours later. So did Gina's entire account. By February, I heard through the grapevine that they'd had to move again. Gina's sister kicked them out after 2 months, said she couldn't handle the drama anymore. Apparently, Ryan had refused to get a job. Mike wasn't paying for anything, and the whole house had turned into a mess of fights and passive-aggressive tension. They ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. No furniture, secondhand everything. Mike got a part-time job at a call center. Gina started selling handmade jewelry online. Ryan dropped out of school and started delivering groceries on weekends. That was the real karma.